2009 through 2014 Subaru Outback with a 2.5 liter engine spark plug replacement. I'm Brian Esser from How to Automotive. I'm going to walk you step by step through the process of changing out the spark plugs. For this job, I'm going to be using Denso spark plugs. I will link these up in the description of the video. So we're going to get started by removing the air cleaner. So you're going to loosen up the clamp here at the back of the throttle body, follow it around and loosen up the clamp here, and we're going to pull this main portion off. So I've been trying out these new M12 Milwaukee hex drive 1/4 inch impact guns here, and they make jobs like this really quick and easy. So once you get the two clamps loose, then there's going to be a clip that we need to get removed, and it requires a pair of clip removing pliers, and it's right here just to the right of the throttle body. Once you get the clip removed, you can start pulling it off the air box and off the throttle body here, and then there's going to be a vent hose in the back here that we need to get loose. You'll need to get a pair of hose clamp pliers or a pair of pliers to remove the clamp and slide it off, and then you can pull the vent hose off of the air cleaner here, and then you can set this aside. Next, we need to remove two nuts from the engine mounts, and I'll explain why in a minute. So there's one here on the right side and one here on the driver's side here that we're going to remove. They're 14mm nuts. I just used about a 10-inch extension with a 14mm socket in my little impact gun here, and remove those two nuts, one on the driver's side and one on the passenger side. To get access to the coils and spark plugs, we need to jack the engine up just a little bit. So once we get the two nuts removed from the engine mounts, then we're going to go ahead and remove the air box here. So you will unplug the mass air, release the two clips there, then there's going to be a hose down here that's clipped in. You're going to pop that hose out, and then once you get the hose popped out, there's going to be the wire loom here is held on with a little holder. To get that off, I'm using a 6mm socket, and I'm just going to slide it over it like this and give it a push. And as you push, it'll pop the wire loom out of the holder. Now that you got that removed, the next step is to take a block of wood and put it on your floor jack, and we're going to slide it under the vehicle, and we're going to jack it up on the oil pan so it's just after the exhaust and just before the sway bar. So you're going to put it on there with the block of wood, and then we're going to lightly jack the engine upwards. So I also put the jack slightly towards the passenger side. We're going to jack this engine up a little bit, and we're going to remove the spark plugs from the passenger side first. So as it does, it kind of tilts it at an angle, so the right side of the engine will pop up higher than the left side of the engine. Now if you look down here towards the side here, you can see the coils, the ignition coils, and we can unbolt those and pull those out, and there's plenty of room now to get these out and also get access to the spark plug. So you're going to unplug the electrical connectors from the coils just by squeezing the tab, and you'll do that for both of the coils. After that, you use a 10mm socket and a little ratchet. I'm using a flex head ratchet here. Go ahead and remove the two 10mm bolts holding the coils in. Once you get those removed, then you can just pull the coils out like this, and you're going to set them aside for now. Once you get the coils out, you want to check inside the tubes here and make sure that there's no oil. If there's oil inside the tubes where the spark plugs are, then the valve covers are leaking, and you're required to replace the valve cover gaskets. And you also may see the oil on the coils itself. So if you look down my spark plug tubes here, they are dry and oil free, which is a good thing. If yours are wet or with oil, then you're going to want to replace the valve cover gasket. If you don't, it'll ruin the coils and the spark plugs. So the spark plugs are different than your standard plugs. They're 14mm, so they make a special socket for it, but I don't have it. So I'm going to use a deep 14 socket and a semi-wabble extension. It's about 2 inches long, and I'll feed it down in here. And then now you can get your ratchet on here and crack it free. And usually when you get these loosened up a little bit, you can spin them out by hand. So I loosened them up with a longer ratchet. Then I switched over to a shorty ratchet, and you can see how I'm working here. Since I'm not using a traditional spark plug socket, when I took the socket off, the spark plug stayed inside the tube, so I'm just going to retrieve it with my magnet like this. So now we're ready to go back in. If you look at the old ones, there's no anti-seize or anything on the thread, so we're going to put this back in the way it came. And also, these come pre-gap from the factory. You don't need to gap them. If the gap is off, I recommend you return them. The little electro on the end of it is so fine that if you tried to use a gapping tool, it would damage it. So now you can go ahead and thread in the spark plugs back into the tubes. So slide them in there and start them by hand, and I like to run them all the way in until they bottom out. And once they bottom out, then I switch over to a torque wrench, and you can torque these down to 13 foot-pounds. If you don't have a torque wrench, what you can do is tighten them up until they're snug, and then about a quarter more turn. So 13 foot-pounds is not a lot of torque, and you don't want to jerk it. You want to ease the torque on like this. Now that you got the spark plugs in, you can go ahead and put the coils back in. And then once you got the two coils back in, you can plug the electrical connectors in and put the two 10mm bolts and tighten those down. Once you got those re-secured, then you can lower the jack down and shift it over to the driver's side slightly, like an inch or two, and then jack it back up. And then that'll raise the driver's side of the engine up higher, and the passenger side will be lower. So that'll give you access to the coils and spark plugs on this side now. I also wanted to mention that you're only jacking the engine up about an inch and a half, and that's it. So go ahead and remove the ignition coils here by unplugging them and pulling out the 10mm bolts. So if you look, I'm kind of reaching around from behind to get access in here. Makes it a little bit easier. So go ahead and remove the two 10mm bolts and then go ahead and pull your coils out. Just like on the passenger side, once you get the coils out, you want to check to make sure that the valve cover is not leaking. An easy way to do that is to use a dental mirror like this, and you'll angle it just right, and you can see right down the tubes, and you'll know right away if the tubes are full of oil or not. To get the spark plugs out on the driver's side, it's the same setup as far as extension and socket goes. So here I am removing the spark plugs. I wanted to show you the angles that I kind of work in to get to these spark plugs. And also this is the same angles that you see me removing the coils and unplugging them. So I kind of like to reach around from behind like this. And that seems to be the easiest way to get access to the everything in here, the coils, the spark plugs, everything. So now I'm going back in with the spark plugs, and I like to switch over to these little shorty flex head ratchets. It makes them quick jobs to get in there and work the spark plugs in and out. I also wanted to point out, when you're starting these spark plugs, you always want to start these by hand to make sure that they thread in nice and smooth and not cross thread. So once you got them run in and snug, then you can torque them down to 13 foot-pounds. Now that you got the spark plugs installed, now you can go ahead and reinstall the two coils, plug them in, and put the two 10mm bolts that held them in and tighten those down. Now you're ready to lower the engine down for the final time. So go ahead and lower the engine down and remove your jack. Now you can go ahead and reinstall the two nuts on the top of the engine mounts, one back here and then one on the passenger side over here. And then once you get these reinstalled, we're going to tighten these up. I tried locating a torque spec for this motor mount bolt, but my service that I used did not provide the spec for it. So go ahead and just tighten these down until they're snug and about a quarter turn more. So once you get the two motor mount bolts tightened down, the next step is to put the air box back in. So I'm going to go ahead and install a brand new air filter, since this one's a little on the dirty side. If yours is even marginally dirty, I would recommend changing it out also. So go ahead and put the air filter in first, and then we're going to put the air box in. You want these slots here to line up on the bottom down here. There's little slots on the bottom of the air box. They have to stab in there. And then we're going to stab it down here, and then we're going to start the little hose on the side and re-secure the wire loom that was on the side of it also, and plug in the mass airflow sensor. So once you got the wire loom plugged into the little clip, the mass airflow sensor plugged in, now you can swing the box into position and clip the two clips on. Now we're going to reinstall the main portion of the air cleaner assembly. The first thing we need to do is plug in the vent line right here that went on the back. So we're going to plug that on, put the hose clamp on. So we're going to put it around the throttle body. And then once you get it around the throttle body, and then you can go ahead and plug that hose on the vent hose on the back, plug that on and put the clamp back on it. Once you get the vent hose and clamp re-secured, then you can go ahead and put the air snorkel portion of it around the mass airflow sensor. And once you got that on there, you can go ahead and tighten up the clamp. And once you get the clamp tightened there, then you can go over to the throttle body portion of it and tighten up the clamp there. After that, you can reinstall the little clip that held on right there. So I will link up all the parts and tools that I use in this video in the description. That way, if you need to pick up any of that, you can find it there. I also wanted to share with you guys that I have a tool store, that I have all the products that I use on a daily basis, all the tools I use on a daily basis. I will link that up in the description of the video. I'm Brian Esser from How to Automotive. I'd like to thank you guys for watching my videos, encourage you to subscribe, invite you to head over to the howtoautomotive.com website for more valuable videos like this. Thank you again for watching.